I came home after 3 years overseas to find that some woman had hijacked my family's $4 million lakefront property, slapped a fancy $2,000 gate on the road, and was charging my elderly neighbors $50 just to see their grandkids by the water. She'd taken my grandfather's old dirt road and rebranded it as something called Willowbrook. Estates, complete with fake stone columns and security cameras pointed straight into the windows of my cabin as I pulled up in my weathered old pickup truck. A robotic voice blared out asking for a resident code, like I was some intruder sneaking into someone else's land. That's when she showed up, flying down the hill in her golf cart, designer sunglasses bouncing off her face, screaming, "Private property! You're trespassing on my land!" I calmly rolled down the window and held up the official deed, with my grandfather's name signed in bold ink from 1987, probably from the same year she was learning her ABCs. The moment she saw that paper, the smirk vanished from her face like someone flipped a switch, because she knew exactly what was about to unfold. So let me ask, what would you do if someone tried to steal your family land while you were overseas serving the country? Drop your state in the comments. But first, let me rewind and tell you how this nightmare began. My name's Marcus Brennan. I'm a 34-year-old Army engineer, recently home after a 3-year tour overseas. While I was busy avoiding roadside bombs in Afghanistan, this woman, Deirdre Hutchinson, was busy orchestrating the most calculated property grab I've ever witnessed. My grandfather purchased this 40-acre dream spot back in 1987 for just $12K. You could still catch the scent of fresh-cut pine from the logs when he signed that deed. Prime lakefront, 800 uninterrupted feet along Lake Thornton, back when buying land didn't require selling an organ. He built the cabin with his bare hands. His pencil markings are still visible on the beams. For over 3 decades, every summer reunion, every July 4th, every Christmas, our family memories are woven into that property. The worn wood railings, shaped by years of use, tell the story of our entire family. My grandfather passed away during my deployment, and he left everything to me. The will was airtight, the deed legally sound. I planned to return and retire there. But I couldn't just leave my unit to fly home and post up as a property guard with missiles flying overhead. That's where Deirdre slithered in. She's 52, angry, freshly divorced, and had recently fled Minneapolis after her husband left her for his dental hygienist. Maybe root canals were less painful than spending another night with Deirdre. She showed up at Lake Thornton with an insurance payout and one goal in mind: civilize us country folks. She bought this concrete disaster of a house, something that looked like a mall and a fallout shelter had a baby, and planted it on a mound like a monument to bad taste. Within months, her imported Kentucky bluegrass was smothering the wildflowers that had grown freely since the Ice Age. Lake Thornton had always been a place where neighbors helped neighbors. If your dock fell apart, 3 guys would show up with beers and drills. If your septic tank backed up, people chipped in $20 without blinking. No one billed you, no one policed you, but Deirdre had a different vision. She launched her reign by suggesting voluntary road fees, even though the county had handled Road 47B maintenance since the 70s. She turned her SUV into a mobile patrol car, cruising through at dawn, scribbling notes about everyone's driveways. Then came the knockout punch. Deirdre convinced some clueless county employee to reclassify our family's road, used for 35 years, as her personal community entrance. She installed that luxury gate precisely where my property line met the county road, effectively turning Grandpa's access route into the front door to her imaginary subdivision. And then she started charging people, many of whom had lived here since before she was born, just to visit the lake. And if that wasn't rage-fueling enough, brace yourself. She told everyone I died overseas. Convinced my neighbors that I was gone forever and she was managing the estate until it could be disposed of. Responsibly, she even gave tours pointing out how they could carve up my land. For max profit, when I finally returned and rolled up to that gate, expecting nothing but dust and maybe a squirrel infestation, I found the locks changed, our family pictures shoved into the shed, and brand new security cameras aimed into every window of my cabin. She'd been systematically stealing my legacy for years. And she actually believed she had pulled off the ultimate heist. She had no idea who she was messing with. Within 3 days, I received a legal notice in my mailbox. Well, what used to be my mailbox before she swapped it for some pretentious brass box labeled Willowbrook Estates Office. The envelope reeked of cheap perfume and was stuffed with 8 pages of pure fantasy. She wanted $3,600 in backlog community dues, an emergency gate installation fee, and $200 for inspecting my unauthorized structures. She cited the Minnesota Planned Community Act. Yes, it's a real law, but wielded it like a toddler with a chainsaw. She even threatened to lien my cabin if I didn't pay up in 10 days. My favorite part? Grandpa's tool shed was now classified as an illegal outbuilding. His compost pile, an environmental hazard, and I was being billed $50 per month to an HOA that didn't exist when I deployed. Most folks would hire a lawyer, lose sleep, maybe go full panic mode. But the Army taught me better. First rule, gather intel. I spent that week deep-diving courthouse records, flipping through dusty volumes that smelled like mildew and justice. And what I discovered would have made Deirdre wet herself on the spot. Deirdre's entire operation was one big illegal fantasy. No HOA paperwork filed with the state. No authority. No legitimacy. Declaring yourself queen of the neighborhood is about as legal as crowning yourself the mayor of Narnia. That road reclassification? A complete bureaucratic oopsie. The county engineer admitted they'd approved her community road application without the mandatory public notice. She'd slipped it in quietly, like a pickpocket at a county fair. Then I looked into her own property history, and suddenly everything jumped into focus. That divorce I mentioned? Her alimony was contingent on her maintaining a home value over $400,000. If it dipped, checks stopped. And if it stayed low for 6 months, she owed her ex nearly $70,000. Her property had been valued at $398,000, barely above water. And the next reassessment? 3 months away, my shoreline access could easily inflate value by 15 to 30%. This wasn't about power. It was about financial survival, and it got worse. Deirdre had been collecting $2,100 a month from 7 families under the guise of road fees, but there was no maintenance account, no actual services rendered. She'd embezzled thousands, straight-up theft with a neighborhood newsletter. I started door-knocking with a plate of my grandma's chocolate chip cookies, the ultimate trust weapon. That's when the truth spilled out like bad plumbing. Poor Ms. Gladys Morrison was in tears. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a contract where Deirdre had tried to buy my deed from the probate court for $15,000, claiming she was protecting the community. The paper felt too new, too phony. Turns out she'd been printing fake documents from the internet and convincing old neighbors she was the executor of my estate. Gladys nearly signed away power of attorney until her grandson, a paralegal, stepped in. Then I got home. New no trespassing signs were hammered into trees, including the oak where Dad built my childhood treehouse. More security cameras had popped up, eyes on every inch of my cabin. And the final straw? A police report. She claimed I'd threatened her with violence, which, of course, never happened beyond showing her a deed through my truck window. That was it. Time to take the fight to her. If Deirdre thought I'd back down like the neighbors she'd steamrolled, she was about to find out exactly what it looks like when a trained combat engineer launches a legal campaign. 3 days after discovering she'd gutted my cabin and staged her own little authoritarian regime, a certified letter arrived from Hutchinson Property Management, LLC, which, of course, existed only in Deirdre's fantasy land. She claimed to have filed a lien against my property for nearly $9,000 in supposed community violations, gate fees, and unpaid assessments. The document looked official until you took a closer look. Fake notary stamps. Citations from real statutes used completely out of context. It was a masterpiece of legal cosplay, but that wasn't even the headline. 2 hours later, I got a call from the State Environmental Agency. Some anonymous tipster had reported my grandfather's septic system as a threat to groundwater safety. Emergency inspection scheduled in 48 hours, with potential fines reaching $10,000. Then came the bomb. My commanding officer from Fort Bragg called, sounding both confused and alarmed. A woman named Deirdre Hutchinson had contacted the base claiming I was unstable, showing severe PTSD symptoms, and had threatened innocent civilians. She'd requested a wellness check and pushed for immediate psychiatric intervention. She was literally trying to destroy my military career with a bunch of lies dressed up as concern. Weaponizing veteran mental health for personal revenge? That's the bottom rung of humanity. What she didn't count on was the army stepping in. Fast. Captain Rodriguez from JAG was furious. He connected the dots immediately and wasn't letting this slide. False mental health allegations are a war crime in paperwork form. And Deirdre had just stepped onto a landmine. While she played keyboard psychologist on Facebook, I began assembling a real legal strike team, Sarah Justice. The neighbor 2 doors down happened to be an attorney. She'd been quietly collecting evidence too, and when I presented my case, she was practically licking her chops at the chance to dismantle Deirdre in court. She laid it out over coffee and a stack of legal briefs. Filing a fake lien? A felony. Even attempting to interfere with legal property rights or spread defamatory claims online could net damages, fees, and criminal prosecution. Our first move? A quiet title action. Basically, it wipes the map clean. It confirms who legally owns what and forces all competing claims to come forward. No more shadow HOAs or backdoor transfers. Next came the tax complaint. Deirdre had been running her little property management company for over 2 years, collecting thousands in fees without a license, a business registration, or tax filings. That's $10,000 per violation under Minnesota law. And with 7 families paying monthly for 24 months, that's 168 violations, over $1.6 million in potential fines. But we weren't just fighting this in court. We were gathering allies. Gladys Morrison had been keeping everything, invoices, letters, threatening notes. Even better, she still had the easement docs Grandpa filed in the 1960s, showing our road had public access rights long before Deirdre attempted her hostile takeover. Mike Patterson, who ran the bait shop down the road, was livid. His revenue had dropped 40% since that gate went up. He offered to rally the weekend anglers to testify, and nothing mobilizes fishermen faster than messing with their access. County Commissioner Janet Holloway also came on board. With re-election around the corner, you bet she didn't want to be known as the official who let a suburban scam artist strangle public land access. She greenlit a full county investigation into road reclassifications and phony property assessments. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Deirdre ramped up her harassment campaign to psychological warfare levels. Motion-triggered floodlights now blinded my windows at night if so much as a squirrel twitched nearby. The scent of chemical herbicide drifted across the land, killing the wildflowers my grandfather sowed decades ago. It was like she was trying to guess out my family memories. Her next move? Social media warfare. She set up a Facebook group, Willowbrook Estates Community Watch, and tagged me in a post so dramatic it sounded like a Netflix crime doc. She cropped camera footage to make it look like I was charging her gate, read slowly pulling into my driveway, and captioned it, "Urgent alert. Unstable military-trained trespasser making threats. Police involved. Community safety at risk. Avoid all contact." Dozens of comments rolled in from people I'd never met, talking about protecting children, locking doors, and how I should be reported to the VA immediately. But here's what you learn in Army intel. Con artists always slip up when they think they've won. While she was playing social media hall monitor, I installed my own trail cameras. Within 2 days, I had footage of her landscape crew dumping yard waste on my shoreline, destroying the natural environment while pretending to protect it. Then I caught the big one. Tourists arriving at the lake, forking over $20 to launch their boats at what had always been free public water. She had literally set up a folding table with a handmade sign, "Day use fee, $20." Proceeds go to the Environmental Protection Fund, translation, stuffing cash into her purse to keep up her alimony lifestyle. Things snowballed quickly. Turns out, Deirdre had been charging everyone in the neighborhood for fake services totaling over $12K, then used the money to build herself a lakeside gazebo and plant imported Japanese maples. 3 families were now behind on bills. Mike had taken out a second loan. Gladys was eating beans every night trying to pay these imaginary compliance penalties. This wasn't a petty dispute anymore. It was widespread. Calculated fraud targeted at good people who trusted their neighbors. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about protecting my inheritance anymore. It was about stopping a manipulative con artist who had been bleeding this community dry, one fake invoice at a time. Now came the counter-offensive. First move, strategy sessions with my allies. Sarah Justice was already elbow-deep in HOA law. She and her husband, Tom, also a lawyer, had quietly researched everything Deirdre was doing and were just waiting for the moment to strike. She was thrilled to have a client who wasn't afraid to fight. Down at the bait shop, Mike pulled me aside. The familiar smell of fishing worms, old wood, and coffee filled the air. He quietly told me that weekend traffic had plummeted since Deirdre's gate went up. Anglers avoided the lake to dodge her interrogations and unexpected usage fees. The place was dying under her rule. And then, the tipping point. The county offices started getting hit with complaints, dozens of them, from residents angry about restricted access to public waters. Charging access to a lake owned by the state? That's illegal in more ways than I can count. Enter County Commissioner Janet Holloway again, now fully backing a crackdown. With re-election on the line, she couldn't afford to look soft on property scammers. But here's what blew the whole thing wide open. A little late-night dive into public records. While scrolling through online documents with a cold cup of coffee and the blue glow of my laptop, I dug into Deirdre's divorce settlement, and holy hell, it was a financial grenade. Turns out, her alimony was conditional. She only kept getting those monthly payments if her home sustained a value over $400,000. If it dropped below that number for 6 straight months, not only did the check stop, but Sherwood Herrick's husband retroactive payments, a whopping $400,000 if it dropped below that number for 6 straight months. Not only did the check stop, but Sherwood Herrick's husband retroactive payments, a whopping $7,000. But wait, it gets better. Her most recent appraisal? $398,000, less than $2,000 from the threshold. And the next reassessment was in October, fewer than 90 days away. Even worse, she was already in the hole for $180,000 in back support she was supposed to pay during the separation. Her luxury fortress of concrete wasn't just ugly, it was underwater financially and creeping toward foreclosure. She had 90 days to pull a miracle, or lose it all. Suddenly, everything made sense. She didn't just want my lakefront access. She needed it. Controlling shoreline rights could magically inflate her property value high enough to keep the money flowing. The loans current and her fake empire standing, every fake charge, every false claim, every HOA fee. It was all to create the illusion of control, boost her home's worth, and dodge total financial meltdown. And she'd been stealing from the entire block to make that happen. She'd been living month to month on our neighbor's money. That $2,100 a month she was collecting was the patch she used to cover her sinking mortgage and keep the lights on. And her master plan? Plan A, harass me into selling low. Plan B, wait long enough for adverse possession laws to kick in, so she could claim the property as abandoned. Plan Salmi C, convince the county the land was tax delinquent and scoop it up at auction for pennies. She'd even contacted developers. Phone records laid it out crystal clear. She pitched them the property as a future private lakefront community with prime water access under management. That's when it hit me. She was never a villain with power. She was a drowning woman grabbing for anything that could keep her lifestyle afloat. When people act this aggressive over land, there's usually money panic fueling the fire, and Deirdre was neck deep in it. But I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I was switching to offense. Every smart campaign needs structure, allies, and a battle plan, and I had all three. First up was Sarah Justice, my attorney neighbor who was more than ready to help dismantle this mess. Her home office smelled like fresh brewed coffee and firepower in the form of legal briefs. We sat down and crafted a strategy that would treat this like the campaign it deserved to be. Step 1. Sarah filed a quiet title action, a legal move that's basically the nuclear bomb for property disputes. It forces anyone claiming even the tiniest sliver of ownership to come forward and put it on the record. No more shadow operations, no more fake HOA documents. Once that goes through, all Deirdre's lies go poof. It cost us about $2,000, but it was worth every penny. Step 2, we secured a temporary restraining order to stop her from accessing or altering anything on my land. With security footage, camera logs, and real estate filings in hand, that turned out to be a cakewalk. Step 3, hitting her where it hurts, her finances. Remember all those unlicensed fees she was collecting for her management services? We filed complaints with the state revenue department. Under Minnesota law, every illegally billed service could result in a $10,000 fine. She had 24 months' worth of them from at least 7 homes. That added up to 168 violations. You do the math. On top of that, we subpoenaed her bank records, standard discovery, which would soon prove she'd been funneling every dollar from her so-called Neighbors Improvement Fund directly into her personal landscaping budget. And we didn't stop there. Mike Patterson offered his bait shop as neutral ground for a community meeting somewhere without Deirdre's surveillance cameras watching. We invited everyone from the lake, passed around cookies and coffee, and let people share their stories. What came out was even worse than I imagined. Elderly neighbors who'd paid hundreds for inspections, others denied access to their docks, one woman who had been publicly humiliated by Deirdre for having unaesthetic siding. No one knew any of it was illegal. They just thought she had some kind of power. Once people started talking, it was like floodgates opened. I spent the next 3 days building a full case file, photos, audio recordings, surveillance footage, copies of every notice, invoice, and threat Deirdre had ever issued. I printed out evidence like my printer was training for a marathon, packets for civil court, the county attorney, the state tax department, the licensing board. And while I worked, I had a professional surveyor come out and install permanent stakes marking my property lines. No more confusion. No more lies about shared access points, bright markers, GPS coordinates, and a signed boundary report certified with the county. I also worked out a temporary access easement through Sarah and Tom Justice's side lot, just in case. Deirdre had more gate games up her sleeve, and in the background, something bigger was building. Sarah connected me with a veterans legal nonprofit, and they offered to fund much of the case. Why? Because my story was sadly familiar. Property rights violations while soldiers were deployed happen more often than you'd think, but almost no one fights back. They saw this as a chance to set a legal precedent. Together, we launched Operation Homecoming, a new initiative that would later help nearly 50 military families in similar situations. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At the time, all I wanted was to end this woman's scam and get my family's land back. The final piece, I installed automatic cameras, security lighting, and GPS tracking on the boundary signs. If she so much as tried to yank one out again, I'd have her on film, and I didn't have to wait long. Within 48 hours of our community meeting at Mike's bait shop, Deirdre went into a tailspin. Her next move? Straight out of a bad spy movie. I spotted a beat-up Honda Civic with tinted windows parked near the public boat launch. Inside sat a greasy-looking guy chain-smoking and snapping photos in my direction. Subtle he was not. Turns out Deirdre had hired a private investigator to gather evidence of me behaving erratically, proof, she hoped, that I was mentally unstable and dangerous. Her plan? Build a case that I was a violent veteran too reckless to be near families. Never mind that all she had was footage of me raking leaves and drinking coffee on the porch. But she didn't stop there. Word trickled. Through the grapevine, Mike heard it from a guy who does snowplow routes that Deirdre had offered a $5,000 consulting fee to a county road supervisor to make her road classification permanent and conveniently lose the evidence that proved it was illegal. Luckily, the supervisor was honest. He reported the bribe to his boss. But the incident made one thing painfully obvious. Deirdre wasn't just desperate. She was willing to buy, fake, or bully her way to a win. By midweek, she leveled up her assault again. She started circulating rumors online that I'd been dishonorably discharged, claimed I'd faked my service record and was lying about my deployment. I started getting dirty looks at the local grocery store, where printed screenshots of her Facebook posts were making the rounds. Meanwhile, she filed 3 separate police reports, each filled with wild fabrications, drug activity, unregistered weapons, suspicious nighttime behavior. Every time, deputies had to swing by and investigate these fake claims. The sheriff's guys were clearly annoyed. They knew what was happening but had to go through the motions. Still, I made sure everything was documented. Dates, times, badge numbers. All of it. I wasn't just going to clear my name. I was building a criminal case. Then came the real harassment. Floodlights, high-beam, industrial grade, pointed directly at my bedroom window. They activated with the slightest movement. Bugs, tree branches, a cat. It looked like a prison yard. She started running her lawnmower at 5:30 a.m. right beneath my window. Music blasting. Then her landscapers blocked the access path I'd made through the justice's property with piles of logs and debris, but removing the survey marker stakes. That was her critical mistake. Every time I replaced them, they disappeared by morning. She said they were a visual nuisance and filed a complaint saying they were a trip hazard. What she didn't realize? My trail cams were recording every violation with timestamps, audio, and clear facial shots. In Minnesota, you only need one person to consent to recordings. I made sure it was all entirely legal. Military training teaches you to keep your composure, gather data, and watch as your enemy unravels. And Deirdre? She was spiraling like a bottle rocket with a broken stick. The real twist came when her own private investigator reached out to me. We met at a quiet coffee shop downtown. The guy looked uncomfortable, his shirt wrinkled and guilt practically radiating from his pores. Over burnt coffee and cinnamon rolls, he leaned in and said, "She asked me to plant something on your property. A bag of weed, a weapon, anything." When he refused, Deirdre threatened to report him to the police and stiff him on payment. He handed me a flash drive with recordings of their conversations. Clear audio of her asking him to fabricate evidence and frame me. That was criminal conspiracy. No gray area there. Just cold, hard evidence of her plotting to frame a veteran. Meanwhile, that bait shop, it had transformed into War Command Central. Mike's Restore Lake Thornton signs were in every front yard within a mile. Angry fishermen were flooding social media with photos of Deirdre's fake gate fees and day passes. Sarah had already helped 3 families file complaints to the Attorney General's Office for fraud and elder abuse, and yet somehow Deirdre wasn't done. She still had one more sick card to play. If I thought Deirdre had already hit rock bottom, I was dead wrong. Because her next move? It was beyond petty. It was nuclear, apparently rattled by my neighborhood alliance, the legal filings, and the growing stack of complaints with her name on them. Deirdre decided to go full propaganda machine. She contacted Channel 7 News in Minneapolis and somehow convinced a reporter to do a story on the hidden danger of rural PTSD veterans terrorizing peaceful communities. She cast herself as a brave suburban homeowner trying to protect innocent families from a mentally unstable former soldier behaving violently, the smell of hairspray and camera. Equipment drifted from her lawn as they set up. There she stood in full concerned citizen cosplay. Pearl earrings, a pastel cardigan, crocodile tears spilling down as she described being afraid to leave home. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. She'd launched a professional-looking website called Citizens Against Military Violence with my face. Plastered right at the top under headlines like, "Dangerous Veteran Claims Land Ownership While Threatening Community Safety." When PTSD becomes your problem. Fake testimonials from fabricated neighbors. Alleged witness reports that I had military-grade weapons on the property. Warnings to protect children. One post demanded the county force me into immediate psychiatric care. At the same time, she filed yet another false report with the Veterans Affairs Office, claiming I needed emergency mental health intervention. It included pages of carefully worded lies, cherry-picked statistics about suicide rates, and sympathy-baiting language about the emotional cost of service. But just when you think it can't possibly get worse. It did. She tried to refinance her home using fake HOA financials as collateral. Her application claimed that Willowbrook Estates owned $2.3 million in infrastructure assets, including roadways, lake access, and community easements. When the bank asked for documentation, she handed over fabricated bylaws, signatures from people who didn't exist, and community minutes from board meetings that never happened. And as if that wasn't unhinged enough, she finally just walked up to my porch one day, cashier's check in hand, and tried to buy me out. $50,000, she said, waving the check like it was some kind of golden ticket. Let's just end all this and move on. You can find a nice place elsewhere. This would do the community a lot of good. I took the check, looked her in the eye, and said exactly what she didn't want to hear. You don't have the legal ground to offer this, and you know it. This isn't a misunderstanding, Deirdre. This is theft. You tried to steal from a soldier while he was deployed. You're lucky all I want is justice. She left in silence, but I could smell it on her. The fear. The cracks were spreading in her story, and she knew it. What she didn't know was that while she was crafting online smear campaigns, I was forwarding the whole mess, website screenshots, recordings, false filings, to every agency and media outlet willing to listen. Sarah got in touch with Channel 7's producer directly. She sent my service records clean as a whistle. Letters of recommendation, deployment history, performance evaluations, not just a record of honor, but dozens of civilian commendations as well. Captain Rodriguez from JAG backed it all up with a formal military statement, warning the station that they were one lawsuit away from defamation if they aired Deirdre's nonsense. Meanwhile, my complaint to the VA about her weaponizing mental health reports, that sparked a federal review. Falsifying psychiatric claims about a veteran is not just immoral, it's often prosecutable. And just when I was starting to think she'd finally quiet down, I found out she had contacted my mortgage company. She told them my property was illegally occupied, and that I was fraudulently claiming ownership, hoping to scare the bank into freezing my financing or even triggering foreclosure. That was the last straw. Banks take interference very seriously. Her name went straight into a fraud investigation file, and now federal banking charges were on the table. Locally, the tide had fully turned, so when Channel 7 sent another crew out to film the final piece, they were ambushed, in the best way possible, by a whole lineup of my neighbors. Mike Patterson, Gladys Morrison, Sarah and Tom, local ministers, veterans, grandparents, all standing tall with affidavits and sworn statements exposing the truth about Deirdre's fraud. The news segment that aired, not the takedown of a dangerous vet she had dreamed of. It was titled, "Veteran Returns to Lakefront Home and Finds His Legacy Under Siege." They showed the fake gate, the doctored documents, interview clips of Gladys holding up the power of attorney scam, Mike with photos of fishermen being extorted, even a clip of Captain Rodriguez condemning false accusations against Army personnel. Deirdre, not even mentioned by name until the end, when the anchor stated the county was investigating possible crimes related to property mismanagement and HOA fraud. She didn't just lose the narrative, she lost everything. By the time November rolled around, the entire Lake Thornton community was buzzing. Everyone knew something big was about to go down. That something? The monthly county commission meeting, scheduled for November 15th. Usually those meetings were sleepy affairs, maybe a couple locals arguing over road salt budgets or zoning permits. Not this time. The room was standing room only. You couldn't walk 10 feet without bumping into someone holding a coffee cup and whispering, "Is she really gonna show?" Even Channel 7 News rolled back into town with a full camera crew. 2 regional newspapers were there as well, lining the walls, press badges gleaming, notebooks in hand. The veteran's story had gone viral on social media, and now every outlet wanted a front row seat for the confrontation. I arrived early with my team. Sarah Justice, sharp as ever with a binder thicker than a phone book. Mike Patterson, wearing his bait shop hoodie and ready to speak for every business she'd hurt. Gladys Morrison, sturdy manila envelope in hand with 2 years of fake HOA documents and threats. County Commissioner Janet Holloway, now in full righteous fury mode after learning how completely Deirdre had made her office look like a bureaucratic joke. Deirdre didn't walk in. She stormed in, 20 minutes late. Her heels clicked against the linoleum like she was walking into a courtroom drama. Her outfit looked expensive, her hair looked perfect, and the poor attorney next to her looked like he wanted to evaporate into thin air. She didn't wait to be called on. She stood up before anyone could stop her, cleared her throat dramatically, and launched into her usual performance. "Commissioners, I represent the concerned homeowners of Willowbrook Estates who've been harassed, threatened, and terrorized by a mentally unstable individual with military training. My clients, peace-loving families, live in fear. Property values have begun to dip. Law enforcement has been called multiple times." She waved around her usual packet of forged documents, edited camera footage, and community testimonials written in the same handwriting. Her attorney nodded along, trying to keep up with the rapid-fire nonsense pouring out of her mouth. She asked the commission to declare my property abandoned, recognize her authority as the community manager, and enforce emergency zoning reassessment to restore public trust. That's when the county attorney, Michael Brennan, no relation, stood up. His voice was calm, but the content? "A legal wrecking ball. Thank you, Miss Hutchinson. Before we proceed, I must inform you that a formal investigation has been completed regarding property, management fraud, and improper road reclassification. In the Lake Thornton area, you could see the blood drain from Deirdre's face. Your homeowners. Association is not legally registered. Your actions constitute operation of an unlicensed business. You have attempted to submit forged documents, and we have credible evidence of attempted bribery of county employees. Her lawyer immediately started whispering a mile a minute, frantically flipping through documents, but it was too late. Next, I stood up. No ranting, no dramatics. Just the truth. My name is Marcus Brennan. This is the 1987 deed to my property, signed by my grandfather, recorded by this county for over 35 years. These are GPS-verified survey reports. This is photographic evidence of Ms. Hutchinson removing my boundary markers. These are audio files of her instructing a private investigator to plant evidence. Gladys stepped forward next, told the room how Deirdre had nearly tricked her into giving away power of attorney. Mike laid out financial numbers, described the nosedive his business had taken after her fake gate turned away fishermen. One family recounted how they couldn't afford Thanksgiving dinner last year because of her illegal fees. Then I dropped the nuclear file. Deirdre's divorce. Settlement. Her financial agreement required her to maintain a home value over $400,000 or forfeit her alimony. Last year's tax assessment set her value at $398,000. She is $2,000 away from losing everything and every piece of this. Plot has been to inflate that number using shoreline, access, and stolen land. At that point, even her attorney sat down and folded his hands. Finally, he stood back up, not to defend her, but to say, I am formally withdrawing from this case, effective immediately. And then came moment we'd all been waiting for. A sheriff's deputy walked forward and served Deirdre with a criminal investigation notice for fraud. The state revenue investigator followed, dropping citations totaling $47,000 in unlicensed business fines. The county attorney announced his office would pursue criminal charges for false liens and attempted real estate fraud for a woman who had spent 2 years pretending to be untouchable. The shutter click of Channel 7's camera as she was escorted out said it all. In the days following that explosive county meeting, justice moved faster than I ever expected, 48 hours. That's all it took for Deirdre's stolen kingdom to start unraveling in real time. County crews arrived first. They tore down her fake stone gate posts, hauled away the $2,000 electronic gate, and yanked out the cameras she'd used to spy on everyone like we lived in a surveillance state. The roar of diesel engines and backhoes echoed through the trees as they cleared the same old dirt road my grandfather had driven on for 3 decades. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air felt clean. Watching that gaudy gate get lifted onto a flatbed was like releasing a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. And Deirdre? She vanished. After pleading guilty to fraud, she was hit with $23,000 in restitution. $23,000 in restitution, but $12,000 in court fines, and a foreclosure notice on her cartoonishly overbuilt lake fortress within a month. She slinked back to a 1-bedroom rental in a Minneapolis apartment complex. Her designer fantasy dissolved into nothing. Just another bitter landlord tangled in debt and paperwork. The community began healing before the dust even settled. We formed a real road maintenance co-op. Transparent, volunteer-led, public accounting. No more fake managers demanding tribute. Just decent people taking turns with the snowplow schedule. Mike's bait shop rebounded almost instantly. Out-of-town anglers flooded back. Property values on our side of the lake ticked up nearly 8%, thanks to local word getting around that our land was finally free from HOA tyranny. For me, personally, the return home finally started to feel real. Volunteers came out every weekend. We restained the deck, fixed the dock, replaced the rusted roof tin. That cabin, the same one my grandfather built with calloused hands and first-generation grit, came back to life. I could still hear echoes of summers. Passed in the creak of old porch boards and the scent of linseed oil soaking into pine, but the biggest thing we built wasn't a deck or a road. It was a movement. Operation Homecoming. A full-blown legal assistance program for deployed service, members whose properties are threatened by fraud, abandonment scams, or fake HOAs. We started helping other families, first in Minnesota, then in neighboring states. To date, Foyson military families helped across 18 states over $340,000 in stolen property value recovered, aussi fraudulent. HOA operations shut down a website. Know Your Property Rights now gets 25,000 monthly visitors. And yeah, we even got a state law passed, doubling penalties for false liens and requiring public notice for road reclassifications. Sarah Justice. Yeah, that's her real last name. Helped build our legal network. Mike ran the fundraising tournaments, fishing derbies, barbecue cook-offs, lawn chair concerts. And Commissioner Holloway? She went from our staunchest ally to our biggest advocate, securing state grant funding that quadrupled our budget within a year. We even host an annual Lake Thornton Veterans Appreciation Festival now. Thousands show up every October. Seminars on property rights, food trucks, bounce houses, fireworks over the lake. The sound of children laughing and bluegrass bands playing against the clink of soda bottles is proof enough. Community wins when it stands together. And yeah, before you ask, I married Sarah last fall, right there by the lake. Neighbors brought potluck dishes. Mike fried fresh walleye. Gladys served as honorary grandmother. Sarah wore boots under her dress because the ground was soft from a morning rain. And my army buddies flew in from all corners of the world to toast with me on the land Grandpa once swore. We'd never lose. It was the proudest moment of my life, a symbol that the home I fought for overseas was waiting for me when I came back. Still standing, stronger than ever, and now? I keep fighting. Operation Homecoming is expanding to 12 states. And counting. Every soldier deserves to come home to what's theirs. No one wearing a uniform should ever lose land to a scam artist while dodging bullets halfway across the world. 3 weeks ago, I got a call about a case in Ohio. Some shady city council is trying to seize a veteran's family farmland to build a private golf course, but there's an 1800s mining rights clause buried in those deeds that might just blow the whole thing apart. That story's coming next week, but until then, I'll be sitting on this porch, coffee in hand, as the birds call out over Lake Thornton, because at the end of the day, no matter how loud the lies or how fancy the gate, the truth always wins. If you've been through an HOA horror story, drop it in the comments. We might even feature it in our legal guides or help you fight back. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of ordinary people standing up against rigged systems. Because the American dream, it doesn't die until we let it. And around here, we don't stop fighting, one property deed at a time.